Satzstruktur. And we're going to have 3 sentences that we're using. Ich komme heute, du kochst eine Suppe und macht eine Aufgabe. So to mean, I am coming today, you are cooking a soup, and he is doing a task. So keep in mind the komme is representing the I'm coming. So it will not be 2 words. Kochst are cooking, macht is doing. Now we'll use a table to look at it better. And here we have 3 types of sentences. Aussagen, statements. Nein Fragen, close-ended questions. So the ones where you only can answer yes or no. So are you doing something, or does this happen? Yeah. And W-Fragen, the W questions. So open-ended questions, the ones that the questions start with the W words: where, why, how, etc. So with Aussagen, actually with all the sentences, the verb is the most important word to some extent. The position of the verb, so is what will make your sentence correct to some extent. So we can think of it as our anchor, because its position is not flexible at all. Some other things, yes, are a bit flexible, but the verb, no. And in the statements, the rule is that the verb is supposed to be in the second position. Now, second position does not mean second word. So, for example, let's say with the statement about macht eine Aufgabe. So maybe macht, we mean someone called one. So, one macht eine Aufgabe. So, one is a man, so we can say der Mann macht eine Aufgabe. In this case, the verb is the third word, but still second position, because you can't separate der and man. Maybe one is also the father of Amani, so you still can't separate that. So der Vater von Amani macht eine Aufgabe. So in this case, fifth word, but still second position. So you have to think of it as whatever you can't separate. Now, this is especially helpful because mostly you'll find that it's beginners who will keep starting the sentences with the same thing, or rather with the simplest thing. So maybe a beginner will start with, I am doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. But with people who are more comfortable with the language, you can usually start with whatever you're trying to emphasize. So be it the time, be it maybe the place you're talking about. So as long as you can identify the verb, you know that everything that came before it is one unit, so that can't be separated. So regardless of how many words it is, you can translate it as one to help you with the meaning. Yeah, so the last example, die Touristen aus Comoros kommen heute. So the tourists from Comoros are coming today. Yeah, so let's leave that at that first, because we will, as we continue and we now start looking at maybe other adverbs, so things like adverbs of time, adverbs of place, you'll see what happens when something else is starting the sentence and not necessarily the subject. So the subject is the doer of the sentence, and the doer can usually be either a pronoun or a noun. Yeah, and sometimes the noun can be given in a lot of detail. So for example, with the tourists from Comoros, so we have quite a lot of detail in that. Anyway, we won't dwell too much on that, but that's the point. Second position does not mean second word. So to now turn statements into yes/no questions, we just bring the verb forward. So it's what will now start the question, and then the subject will come in position 2. And then the other information will come after the 2. So our questions: komme ich heute? Am I coming today? Maybe you're confirming something. Kochst du eine Suppe? are you cooking a soup? Or macht eine Aufgabe, is he doing a task? Now, when we get to W-Fragen, just like with English, the W word is what's starting. When is this happening? How is this happening? Why is this happening? So, it's just like you've added a W-Frage, a W word to the beginning now of der Nein Fragen. So, wann komme ich heute? Warum kochst du eine Suppe? Warum macht eine Aufgabe? So this is how we'll be color coding things. Yellow, the verb, the subject, red, or whichever color this is. So the yellow is what does not move at all. The red, if it isn't in the first position, it's in the third position. Now in statements, it can switch, but in the W-Fragen, it has to come in the third position because the first position is obviously already occupied. So this is how some sentences will look like if the person decides to start their sentence with something other than the subject. So if maybe the person is emphasizing that it's a soup that the man is cooking, we'll have eine Suppe kocht der Mann oder eine Suppe kocht er. We had this from the previous part. Die Kinder mit ihren Freunden spielen sie Schach. So the children, we saw that this Z was they. So they are playing chess with their friends. So we know that this is the children, they are playing chess with their friends. But if you translate it like in parts, it will be with their friends play they chess. And that's actually how now it sounds. So if you, for actually most of the sentences, if you translate them or you try to think of how would I say an English sentence and then now replace it just with the individual German words, you will be wrong because the German sentence structure sounds kind of Shakespeare-like in English. So if you hear that your German sentence is making sense in English, it's most likely wrong. So this is why we said build a German brain. Don't borrow English rules. Just make sure that you remember exactly how such things, exactly where the position of the verb should be, where the subject should be, if it's starting, or if you choose not to start with it. Yeah, and this will also help definitely with reading comprehension, so that if you see something other than the subject starting, you know not to translate it wrong to some extent. Because think of it this way, if maybe you're reading a story or like in exam settings, you need to translate quickly. So if you read the different sentences as with their friends play the tennis, it won't stick in your head as easily as if you translate it correctly. They are playing tennis with their friends. So whenever you're translating, think of it as if like would however you've translated be acceptable if you are like a professional translator. Like, will it make sense or will you be confusing people? So if your sentence doesn't make sense, then you will also confuse yourself. So when translating, you have to know what starts, what comes first, and we'll see this with other types of sentences. So yeah, but this is just to help with what's it called, reading comprehension. So when you're saying it, forget about the English rules. When you are now translating, remember how to interchange the sentences so that it makes sense to you as you translate in your mind, so that it's easier to remember. Okay, now we need to move on so that we don't draw this out too much further. Next example, nächste Woche kommt der Vater von Amani. So maybe our focus here is when he's coming. So it's not today, not tomorrow, specifically next week. Heute kommen die Touristen aus Comoros. So our focus here is on when they are coming. So that's why we've started with the time. Yeah. Now this is still correct. So today are coming the tourists from Comoros, but obviously when you're translating it, today the tourists from Comoros are coming. Now let's look at some Fragewörter, so the question words. So we have wie, we already saw it in things like wie heißt du, wie ist dein Name. So how, wer, wenn, wem. We had wer bist du, wer sind sie, so who are you. When, wem, they're just kind of like who versus whom. So same thing, all of them are just who. Woher, woher kommst du, where do you come from, so where from. Wo, so we have woher, wo, wohin. Woher and wohin, both are variations of wo. Wo, where, wohin, where to. And two that usually confuse people, especially English speakers, wo, where, because where, most times you'll assume that it should be where, wo, who, but it's inverse. Wann, when. Warum, wieso, weshalb, why. But you'll mostly, in A1, will mostly be using warum. Wieso, weshalb, they'll come in later levels. Was, what, welch, which. Welch has different meanings, but when used as a Fragewort, specifically which. Sorry, not different meanings, several meanings. Wie viel, so wie also has, wie is the one that you can add a lot of things to it, because even think of it like in English, how long, how far, how tall, how short. Yeah, so usually whatever you pair it with, as long as you can figure out the meaning of the next word, you'll be okay. So wie viel, how much, not to be confused with wie viele, how many. So these are the two that are actually quite confusing. Wie viel, wie viele. So to try and remember these two, wie viel usually goes with asking for costs of things. Wie viel kostet das? So how much does that cost? Wie viele, so wie viele usually goes with together with a noun. How many this? How many that? So maybe something like wie viele Bücher sind da? How many books are there? Wie oft, how often, wie alt, how old, wie schnell, how fast. Yeah, and the many other V's. So now let's look at our exercise on sentence structure. So for exercise, we're using kind of basic words. We're going to be looking at all three types of sentences, so we have to figure out which one makes sense where. Okay. So we have the meanings though, so we're trying to now just rearrange the words and to make them make sense. So the only extra thing we're doing here is to conjugate. You already know that, so no worries. Nummer 1, the neighbors are singing loud. So we will start with die Nachbarn and then our verb statement. So yeah, our verb comes next, singen, and then how they are singing loud. So die Nachbarn singen laut. Nummer 2, how often do you cook? So the word, how, it's a pair in this case, wie oft. So how often, wie oft. Conjugated verb comes next. So du, pronoun is du, so kochst. Wie oft kochst du? Nummer 3, do you all like to swim? So this is a Nein Fragen, so we're supposed to start with the conjugated verb. Ihr behaves like es, so ends with the T. So schwimmt, and then the pronoun comes next. Schwimmt ihr, so the doer. Schwimmt ihr gern. Gern, very important word, especially when using it with we use it with verbs to show that you like to do something. So when giving something like your hobbies, although we'll still look at this in depth later, when giving something like your hobbies, you don't say, I love swimming. Same thing with the building a German brain. So your sentence is supposed to sound like you're saying, I swim gladly, I do this gladly, because the gern kind of translate is like gladly. So I do this gladly. We'll see it better when we get to hobbies. So schwimmt ihr gern? Nummer 4, do you play football? Same thing, ja, nein Frage. So we start with our conjugated verb. Pronoun here is sie in caps. Another thing. The only things in caps are the ones that are supposed to be in caps, whether they come at the beginning of or the middle of the sentence. So if you see something like sie in caps, it's not to mean that it should start the sentence, because we saw the two things in German that are always in caps, nouns and the sie that is you formal. So our question here, we start with our conjugated verb. In sie, it stays in infinitive, so spielen. And then next comes our subject, sie. So spielen sie Fußball. Nummer 5, he's learning German. Statement. So we start with the subject. He, is learning. We conjugate it. Now, conjugated verb. Third person singular always ends with the T. Lernt. And then the other information, Deutsch. So lernt Deutsch. Nummer 6. We live in Düsseldorf. This is easy. We saw it in the sich verstellen. So we're sure that the in Düsseldorf should come last year. So at the beginning, wir, conjugation of leben usually stays the same, infinitive. Conjugation of wir rather stays in the infinitive, so wir leben in Düsseldorf. Nummer 7, she finds tennis fun. So we start with the what? With the subject. Sie. This is third person singular. Ends with the verb should end with the T, but because we have the D, we won't drop the E in the finden. So sie findet. Then the next thing is the tennis. Sie findet Tennis Spaß. This is one of the few sentences that the English and German, like the words will be in the same order. Most times this is not the case. So it shouldn't lie to you that this is the case for the majority. I'm not sleeping. So ich, verb should be in the second position. Conjugation of ich, drop the N. Ich schlafe nicht. Now this is where we start to see like some of the differences. So it should not be ich nicht schlafen. Ich schlafe nicht. Final question, how old is the couple? W-Frage. So the W word should start wie. It's a unit, so wie alt. Conjugate the sein to become is. Is actually the easiest one. Is, you just add the T in German. Ist. Wie alt ist, and then the couple, das Paar. So wie alt ist das Paar? I hope that helps someone. Usually you can just create very simple sentences. So like where we're at right now, if you know a couple of verbs, maybe things like sick, hungry, tired, you can actually construct very easy sentences with them, like just 3-word sentences or 4-word sentences at max. If you are including, like if the subject part, instead of using the pronoun, you're using something like the man, the woman, the whatever. Yeah. So you can try it. You can try changing them into yes, no questions. You can try maybe adding a Fragewort in something that makes sense. So maybe like let's say I am tired. So tired is müde. So we will have ich, am, bin, müde, ich bin müde. So you can change it to bin ich müde, am I tired, and then add a Fragewort. So which Fragewort could work in this question? Something like why am I tired? So warum bin ich müde? Simple. So you see you've practiced all three of them. So all the best with that. Next we will have Zahlen, numbers.